I've got no defense here. No defense. Just fiddling with my phone, trying to figure out what I'm doing.
How are you, buddy?
All good, thanks, dude. All good.
That's good.
Doing well, thanks. And yourself?
I'm okay, man. I just did that crazy ride this morning. I'm loving riding it though. There's nothing else you can do. Can't play golf. Can't do anything else. My calves, my knees are shot, so I can't run. So I've got into the cycling thing, and you blokes are animals. Animals, dude. Jesus. How do you maintain? How long have you been doing it since you were a kid?
Yeah, I've been riding a bike since I was a kid, for sure. But I only got into the professional side of things pretty late. As a sort of late teenager, I started training properly. So it's not something I've done all my life. I mean, some of the guys on my team, for example, they've been racing their bikes since they were 10, 11 years old. So that's just a whole different level.
Teenager in South Africa.
I was, yeah. I mean, I was riding my bike down there, but it only really got serious towards my late teens, really.
What made you make the decision to go pro cycling?
Well, I mean, I was studying an economics degree in Joburg, but at the same time, cycling had always just been a passion of mine. I mean, I just loved riding my bike. I mean, schoolwork, classwork, any sort of studies, it was a slog to get through for me. Whereas obviously riding my bike is just what I wanted to be doing. So when it went from being more of a hobby, and I got the chance to come over to Europe for the first time and try my hand as a professional, I didn't think twice. Obviously, I just went for it and never looked back, really.
Where are you at the moment?
So I'm down in the south of France at the moment. On lockdown.
Is that where you're training? Are you completely locked down there in France?
Yeah, it's locked down completely. So no one's allowed out unless it's to buy food or provisions or whatever. And it's pretty strict. But obviously, I'm training on the indoor trainer every day. Still doing huge hours, trying to stay fit and getting ready for the Tour de France if it does happen this year.
Do you think the tour will happen? I know it's been delayed. They cancelled all the football in France, and I know we've had a chat offline. You're not so sure, or you think the tour will happen?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's been postponed already until the end of August, starting at the end of August, going through September. But I think everyone's just waiting to see if it is actually going to happen or not. I mean, it's going to be a big ask. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts in a race like the Tour de France. You just think of the thousands of people who are actually involved with the running of it, and then the hundreds of thousands of millions of spectators who would normally come out and watch as well. So it's going to be a tricky one.
Could you do a ride like that without spectators? They're talking about cricket starting here. They're talking about the PGA Tour golf starting, all behind closed doors, no spectators. Could you get up a mountain in a ride like that without everybody cheering you as much as they cheer you and throwing piss in your face occasionally?
I mean, for sure, we can put the race on without people standing on the roads and fans in that sense. I mean, we can put on the race and it could be broadcast on television.
Yeah. But I'm talking about that proper energy you get from a spectator.
I mean, you're not going to get the same scenes as you would get going through these tunnels of just people everywhere and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But maybe that's the version of race we need to see this year. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, in theory, we can put the race on, but I think the bigger question is, would the organisers be able to keep people from actually coming out and gathering in large crowds? I think that's the bigger question.
Rory McIlroy was asked about the Ryder Cup and the Ryder Cup being played this year, and he said without spectators there should be no Ryder Cup. And I would say that's pretty similar to the Tour de France. I don't think the spectacle will look as good. I think cricket you can play behind closed doors. I mean, I've played test matches in Dubai. You played in county cricket. You hardly get anybody watching. You play some days, even in Australia, South Africa Tour Australia or whatever. We're lucky as Englishmen, we get good crowds that follow us. But there are some days where there are no crowds. So I think you can put that on. Whereas in cycling, I don't think it'll be the same for you dudes.
I don't think it'd be the same at all. I mean, sure, we can actually do the race between us, but I mean, we're not going to get the same scenes. That's for sure. You wouldn't get the same atmosphere, the same colors, everything else. It would be a very, very different event.
So how do you train for it then? What are you doing at the moment? What is a day in the life of Mr. Chris Froome at the moment? You are wanting your 5th Tour de France title. What is a day in the life of yours at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm obviously up every morning into the gym, first thing in the morning, and then I'm trying to replicate what I would normally be doing on the road this time of year, building up to the Tour de France. I'm trying to replicate that, obviously indoors.
How many Ks a day?
So some days even doing up to sort of 6 hours sitting on the stationary trainer. Big days. It gets pretty boring at times. I've been through every playlist I own about 10 times each. But yeah, I mean, just getting through it and doing the best I can. Obviously, I'm coming off the back of a big injury now as well.
I was going to speak to you about that. Yeah.
Last year, so I mean, a lot of the training I've been doing up until this point has been indoors already. So it's almost prepared me in a way for this whole lockdown period, and I think mentally I'm obviously able to get through it a bit easier.
When did you get back on your bike? Because I mean, that was a horror crash. You broke all sorts of bones. You rode into a wall trying to blow your nose or something.
I took my hand off my handlebars and signaled to my teammate behind me, and I don't know what happened next. It was a dead straight piece of road. It sounds as if the wind might have taken my front wheel and basically guided me into a brick wall at almost 60 kilometers an hour. So it was a nasty crash. I broke my leg in 2 places. I broke my arm, fractured vertebra, sternum, ribs, punctured lung. How long were
you in ICU?
It was nasty. I was in ICU for the best part of a week, and then in hospital for, what was it, over a month, I think.
Goodness.
So how do you? But I mean, I've been really lucky. We've been really lucky. All the injuries that I had were injuries that I could fully recover from, and that's where I'm at now. I've just made it back. I made it back onto the bike on the road in January. I started my first race of the year in February, but
how did that go?
That got cancelled halfway through because of the coronavirus outbreak, and people actually in the race were getting sick. So that race came to an end pretty quickly.
Where was that?
That was over in UAE. That was over in Abu Dhabi. So we were on lockdown there, and then everyone's been on lockdown ever since.
When did you move to England?
Say again?
When did you move to England?
I never did. I mean, I was born in Kenya. Yeah. Grew up there, and then later went to school in South Africa, and then moving around the continent in Europe ever since I turned pro. So I've never actually lived over in Britain.
Yes, jack of all trades, buddy.
How about you? When did you move to England?
When I was 20. Moved over at the age of 20. So I'm coming up to my 20th anniversary. So I need to start making some decisions next year. What sort of nationality? Who did you support in the Rugby World Cup final?
I was actually supporting Wales. Wales. Obviously my wife is Welsh. But I was watching it with a South African. We went out there to go and I happened to be in Japan at the same time, so went and watched the game, and it was fantastic over there actually.
Yeah. How do you prepare to ride the Tour de France cycling in your house when everything is going on? If you were normally within your team now, you'd have a massage, you'd have a physio, you'd have everything. Is Michelle doing all the massage? Who's doing all your physio? How do you maintain that side? Because professional sport isn't just about you jumping on a bicycle and cycling for 6 hours. It's about, obviously, everything that goes on behind the scenes, massaging the right areas, making sure you're up and ready to go the next day. And it's properly professional.
100%. No. I mean, it has been challenging in this period. Not having obviously the support of the personnel who would normally have around us. So in the meantime, my wife Michelle's had to become a mechanic, a soigneur, doing massage every day. No, just kidding. Just been trying to get through it the best I can. Really, I mean, obviously, I haven't really seen anyone from the outside for months now, but. I think pretty much most of my rivals are all in the same situation. So we're all trying to do the best we can under the circumstances.
And when I went on to announce our chat that we were going to have today, you bring up a very good word there: rivals. Team Ineos has 3 leaders, three big dogs. You have to play understudy to certain riders at certain times. Who decides in Team Ineos when you've got Bernal, you've got Thomas, you've got yourself? Thomas has won the Tour, Bernal's won the Tour. Did Bernal win last year?
He did, yes. Bernal won last year.
You've won 4 titles. So you're going for Tour de France number 5 to be elevated as, the greats. The greats have done number 5 and hopefully you get number 5. I'd love you to get number 5, but who in Ineos decides Froome's going to win the Tour de France now in September, and who decides, actually, no, Froome, you're going to be working for Bernal, or Thomas, you're going to be doing such?
100%. So generally, when we go into a Grand Tour, you'd want to go in, best case scenario, you'd want to go in with a leader, and you'd want to go in with a backup as well. So someone, if that leader crashes out, gets an injury, gets sick halfway through, there's someone who can take over the reins and get the job done and get a team victory. Because at the end of the day, obviously, whether it's myself, Bernal, or Thomas, the most important thing has to be one of us who wins it. You've got to remember there are over 200 guys in the bike race. And if another team wins it, then none of you really win anything. Like it's not. So the most important thing is the team, first and foremost. But it will be a management decision before the race actually starts. Management would make those decisions and say, okay, well, based on condition, based on the course and strengths of this guy, we're all going to ride for him, and it's going to be all in for this guy. And the whole team basically needs to get around that.
What happens if you know that you're riding better than Bernal in September and the team has told him you've got to win, like Formula One? You watch Formula One circuits and Rosberg can be doing well, better than Hamilton, and you've seen these Vettel and all 100%. These. I mean, it's chaos, and I don't understand it at all. I think it's bullshit. If you are riding better than your mate, then the team, it shouldn't be team orders to stop Froome from getting number 5. If you're riding for number 5, so say you're riding in September now, you're riding better than Bernal. You know you're riding better than Bernal.
100%.
You're going for Tour de France title number 5. How can your boss tell you, no, Froome, oh, hold on a second, mate. No, you can't do it. Bernal's going to win it, and you know you can beat him.
That's obviously where it starts to get complicated, or there's a bit of a grey area there. But at the same time, I think the team does have a pretty good idea who's actually who's in a better shape to win the race. I mean, obviously we've got power meters on our bikes measuring every pedal stroke that we do. So before we go into that race, I think the team would have a pretty good idea exactly where we're all at and who actually stands the best chance of winning.
And the team dynamics within your guys' teams having 3 Tour de France winners is pretty good?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, we all get on really well. I mean, you see on some teams where those leaders literally don't speak to each other, and it can be toxic in some cases. But thankfully for us, I mean, we all get on really well, and we'll make it work.
How many of you in a team?
So there's 8 of us in each in a race like the Tour de France, but that 8 is selected. to guys to go into the Tour.
It's amazing because if you've got that number of riders, and you've obviously, I mean, I'm speaking specifically about Ineos now because that's your team, and you've got 3 winners of the Tour de France in your team. Do you guys all get paid the same amount of money? Even the guys that are there shunting and doing all the hard yards to make sure that Bernal or Thomas or Froome wins?
No. Unfortunately, it's not that straightforward. No, obviously everyone's got different jobs, different structures completely. So it's a bit like football, I guess. The bigger stars get paid more. The guys doing the unseen jobs will always get paid a bit less. So yeah, that's just how it works, really.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I didn't understand. I mean, obviously in football, I would have imagined it was a little bit more different just because of the scenarios. But in your job, where you guys are crazily riding up those hills and you're in the slipstream and you're the one out there, I mean, it's amazing because, goodness, you must have some proper teammates to be able to trust guys to ride just 100%. For you to make sure you can ride those circles on the Champs-Élysées.
100%. I mean, it's brutal. I mean, guys will literally turn themselves inside out for hours, for weeks on end, and they don't get nearly the same amount of credit as the guys who actually cross the line first. I mean, obviously they come in sometimes an hour behind the rest of the guys. So I mean, it's a brutal sport in that way. But yeah, it's very, very much a team sport in that respect.
Did you have a hero in cycling growing up? Who's your hero? Miguel Indurain? Who's your hero?
I didn't really. I think also because I came from such an unconventional sort of cycling background, obviously having been born and brought up in Africa, I didn't really look up to anyone that much as a youngster coming up. I was just trying to do my own thing and trying to make it my own way. Sorry, Kevin, I've just got to ask, what's the structure in cricket? Just going back a second, how does it work in cricket? Because I mean, is it the same thing where as different as you have stronger batsmen, bowlers?
Yeah, I got paid the big bucks.
Does everyone get paid the same, or? No,
I just got paid the big bucks. They just gave me all the cash. But no, it's a team sport played up of individuals because you've got your batters, you've got your bowlers, and only collectively do you go and field. So the batters go and do their job, and the bowlers go and do their job. And because it's so individual in terms of the job that you're doing, I mean, goodness, if a bowler, you know that if a bowler's doing well and the numbers that he starts to get, and you know if a batsman does well and the numbers that the batsman gets, you end up on similar contracts on a team level. So there'll be like A+ A and B+ contracts. So it'll depend on how much you play and how consistent you are within the team environment. But then personal endorsements and stuff are up to brands to identify players that they want to get behind to promote all their brands. And then there's the Indian Premier League, which is literally a number. You name your price within certain categories, and they bid for you every year to go and play in that tournament in India. So it's it's fun. It can be fun. It's not so fun when you don't get bid for. I tell you that for free. But that's how it works in cricket. Really, it's sort of under the radar. The guys get paid well, but no, it's under the radar. And I suppose you work together as a team when you're fielding, but when you're bowling by yourself. When I'm out there batting in a test match in Melbourne or in Cape Town or in London, you're out there by yourself.
And are you still playing at the moment? I mean, in any capacity?
No, I finished 18 months ago. I hung my boots up 18 months ago. I didn't want to practice anymore. Done. And so, and also I got so heavily involved in conservation. And I mean, let's go down the conservation route. The rhino route, the conservation route. I got so involved in that I was wanting to spend more time in Africa. I was wanting to play more golf. I was wanting to do all sorts. I mean, I'd done with all my practice and the training that I put into it. Yeah. I was completely done. I didn't want to hit any more balls. I didn't want to sit in any more team meetings. I was completely finished.
But I mean, it almost sounds as if you don't really have that love for it anymore, or is that?
Yeah, I lost it. I was playing my last season in Australia. I was playing for the Melbourne Stars, a franchise tournament, a T20 tournament there. And I was starting to feel that every single training session needed to be optional because I'd prefer to be on the golf course and playing golf instead of grinding away. And I mean, when you're the icon player, and you're being paid the big bucks, you should actually be at every training session, because if there's youngsters there that need guidance or need help, then you're there to be able to say, listen, maybe try this, what about this, or encourage the youngsters to become a lot better. And that's a position that I loved for 4 or 5 years, playing T20 cricket around the world. But in that particular season down under, I was like, Jesus, all I want to do is play golf. I don't really want to be here. So I got through that season, and then I went straight to Dubai to play in the Pakistan Super League, and every single practice there was optional. I said, nah. So I was playing the L's Club, I was playing Dubai Creek, I was playing Trump's course, I was playing every single golf course, and I decided I'm out. Done and dusted. So I hung my big stuff.
Did your cricket complement the golf at all, or was that just a...
It didn't actually. It didn't. But I mean, like in lockdown at the moment, the reason why I got so into golf and the reason why I'm so into your crazy sport is because that mental engagement to become better and to train and to apply my mind to something and to be competitive is helping me so much. Like on the golf course, I can go and train my brain the way that I train my brain trying to bat in a test match, the way that I prepared for every international that I played. And I do that on the golf course. I do that in the driving range out here. And then on the bike now in lockdown, like I'll be competitive in the way that I do it. I'll ride in groups. I mean, I tried to ride with you last week. And I mean, Jesus, 24 minutes in and I was, you can go, mate. You can go. But it's that passion and it's that mental space that you can get into to actually be competitive. And that's what I love.
Brilliant. Yeah, 100%. 100%.
I got a load of questions, but I mean, I suppose where I want to go with this now is why I think everybody's watching this, because crikey, it blew up. Doping and cycling. Yeah. I mean, I lost a lot of interest in cycling when I read that book, The Secret Race. I don't know if you know the Secret Race. Yes, I read that book, The Secret Race, and then obviously Lance Armstrong, who everybody thought was this unbelievable cyclist, and everybody's got their different views on it. Where is cycling at now? Because, I mean, I lost a lot of interest 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, Phil Leggett, I was like, oh, that voice, every single time you guys saw, you did everything. I was just like, oh, where do you think cycling is at now?
100%. I think it's a good point to talk about, because I mean it's still this. I think a lot of people on the outside don't really see what happens in the sport at the moment.
Yeah.
But I turned professional back in 2008, and I turned professional. I thought, okay, I'm in it at a good time. Those sort of crazy years are behind us now.
Yeah.
And I got the shock of my life. I was put straight into the Tour de France as a neo-pro at the age of 23. And it was just this, I almost just couldn't believe what was going on. I mean, guys were being pulled out of the race all around me for cheating, for doping.
Really?
And yeah, one of my own teammates, a Spanish guy, sat just across the bus from me. Halfway through the race, we had police. I woke up one morning, there's 50 gendarmes in our hotel, and they marched him out in handcuffs. I was just like, what the hell's going on, basically? And we got to the end of that tour, and probably the best part of 20 guys had been pulled out the race for cheating throughout the race. So it really was a bit of an eye-opener. I mean, the race was incredibly fast. I mean, okay, I was a neo-pro at the time. But since then, it must have been towards the end of that year, the authorities introduced what they call the biological passport.
When was this? What year is this?
I think this is towards the end of 2008. I think it was introduced in 2009. So after 1 year of being professional for me, where basically what it is a fingerprint for your blood almost. So every blood test, every anti-doping control that the rider would go to, you get your blood values plotted on a graph, and there's obviously the natural variance that it can go up and down by, but they basically figure out what's natural and what's not. And so basically what they do is they can stop people from cheating, even if they can't find a product or a banned substance. If your blood values fluctuate enough to show that there's any kind of manipulation, you're out. You get a 4-year ban now. So that came into effect in 2009, and I think that had a huge impact on our sport. And I think since then, cycling has just they've been so tight on the controls and the out of competition controls. I mean, we literally have to log on and register every day of our lives where we are so that we can be tested. And I think these are the small things that people don't necessarily know about. They think cycling and they think, oh, it's a filthy sport and all the rest of it. But I genuinely believe it's in a great place now. And there's 24-hour testing.
How many years do you think Armstrong messed up cycling for? Because I'm sitting here now, I used to love it, absolutely love it, but when I saw you geezers going up some of those mountains in France faster than I could drive a Ferrari, I was just like, no, Jesus, how long do you think he harmed the sport for?
We're still having to justify ourselves. Even that we're having this conversation now.
Yeah.
This is 15 years on at least, and we're still talking about it. So it has had a lot of damage. That era has obviously damaged the sport to a great extent. But I really do believe that the sport has turned the page now. And I don't believe I'd have been able to win 40 Tour de France's if it hadn't changed. So I genuinely do feel the sport's in a great place now.
That's really good. I suppose that's amazing for everybody to hear that you think that the sport is in a great place. The times that you guys are doing now, the doping times that we're going on with Armstrong and all that, you guys are going faster or you're going slower? Because I know that we had a chat the other day about this, and you gave a beautiful explanation as to the averages. Why don't you give everybody that explanation?
Yeah, it is fascinating because obviously we know what was happening 15, 20 years ago. I'd say the majority of the field were using something and to go faster. And now I know the sport is 100 times cleaner, but yet we are going faster now up climbs than they were back then. It happens quite regularly actually. We'll go and use the same climbs or same courses that they did back in those days, and we're going faster than they were then. And people just don't understand, well, how does that make sense? And the best way for me to explain it is I think as a sport, we've evolved so much in terms of technology, nutrition, ways of training. So I think as athletes, we're probably better now than they were 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But having said that, I don't think our ability to recover is necessarily the way it was back then. I think using whatever they were using to manipulate their blood back then would have meant that they could have probably done that day in, day out for 3 weeks. And now we'll go flying up a climb and have one massive stage, but you can visibly see that there's a change of pace for the next 2-3 days. The whole group just needs to go slower, and I think that's probably the best way of seeing it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. When you said that to me the other day, I was just like, no one actually sees that. No one actually just understands that. It takes one little position and they'll say, right, oh, there we go, you're guilty. And goodness, it's crazy. When I announced this last night or yesterday on it was just, the negativity that surrounds the sport isn't luck at all. And how do you guys, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with the negativity? How long do you want to ride for? Are you going to sign a new deal? You're 34 now. You want number 5 of the tour. How long do you want to go for? Must be difficult with the negativity around.
It's of course it is challenging with the negativity and always having to answer those same questions year in, year out, and put up with the same skeptics who just won't believe basically any performances. But at the same time, what can we do? We just get on with it, and like we know we're doing things right, and I think that's the most important thing. Is if we know we're doing things right and we've got nothing to hide, and as long as we're enjoying it, I think we just carry on and just keep putting up with these questions and trying to explain to people from our point of view why we think it has changed. But obviously, I mean, you're still going to get guys who try and break the rules, and then everyone will turn around and say, this guy's been caught, see, it's filthy, all the rest of it. But I mean, the way I see it is the sport is catching anyone who does try and break those rules now. They are getting caught now. And yeah.
And I think another trend in all the questions was, I mean, obviously first was about doping and was about the negativity around cycling. But I think that the next line of questioning and the general theme of questioning was your positivity and your comeback and how you remain so positive and how you inspire so many people. I mean, it's crazy the amount of questions of, Chris, how do you remain so positive? How are you so driven? Where do you get your enthusiasm from? How long do you ride a bike every day? I mean, your positivity is infectious, and it really rubs off on so many people. It's crazy. I mean, how many questions on your positivity?
I mean, I think it's because I genuinely just do love riding my bike.
Brilliant.
And since breaking all the bones in my body last year, I think it's just given me that much more motivation now to want to come back. And I mean, it would be a cool comeback story if I could come back to the top level after this. So, and I mean, all the ingredients are there. I've got the motivation and leaps and bounds. I've got a great team, so I believe it's possible. I've got to give it everything I've got and see what comes of it.
Are you allowed to tell us all if you're number one for the Tour de France, or can you not tell us?
So I actually don't know that answer either yet.
Liar!
No, really. No, seriously. And I mean, it's only going to be something that's going to be decided, I'd say, in the weeks leading up to the Tour de France, just on numbers, purely on numbers and our strengths.
Wow. So you've got to continually bash that bike as much as you're bashing that bike at the moment, even though you may not ride the Tour de France. And what happens if it is postponed till next year? Are you going to go on a bit of a break for a month or two, or do you just keep pounding away?
Well, I mean, yeah, good question. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what does happen, even if it's not the Tour de France, if there's any form of racing this year, or if it's just going to have to be e-racing. Who knows?
I'm going to race you.
You are at some point. We're going to have to do something. Yeah, I'll give you a little head start though. Actually, that's Kevin. That's one of the questions someone sent through here. I got a few questions sent through on my side, but I've got a question here from QPR Steed on Twitter saying, who would be better, Chris as a cricketer or Kevin as a cyclist? So, do you rate yourself as a cyclist?
I think I'd be better at cycling than you would be at cricket.
I think you're probably right.
Mate, you've already broken all the bones in your body. I'd hate to see you facing one of our fast bowlers.
I was going to say my hand-eye coordination probably is not quite there. Mind you, I could bowl pretty fast.
Could you?
Bowl. Yeah, I used to play a bit when I was back at school, so I could bowl, but I was a terrible batsman.
So what would be your other sport? What would be your favourite other sport? If you were going to watch any sport on TV, what would it be?
Rugby, 100%.
Rugger?
Yeah.
Really?
100%.
Oh, okay. Are you type with any other?
I used to love playing, but I just obviously didn't have the build for it. That's all.
Are you tight with any of the rugby boys?
Not really, no. I've got to be honest. I do find it really hard to follow other sports, especially when I'm in sort of full training mode and on the road most of the year. Your love of conservation. What about your love of conservation, mate? Because I know that this is something that's obviously brought our friendship on. Is your love of conservation, your love of Africa, your love of wildlife.
how did you get into the conservation space? I think you put the most beautiful picture up of you as a little boy with next to a rhino.
So that was out in Old Pietersen in Kenya, where my mother used to take me quite a few times when I was a kid, and they've got an amazing sort of rehab program for animals, endangered animals. It's like the last northern white rhino out there, Sudan, up until last year. Unfortunately passed away. I mean, you know what it's like, Kevin. I mean, growing out out in Africa, being in the bush the whole time, it's impossible not to just fall in love with nature and seeing how much of an uphill battle there is, especially now for the rhinos. It's a great cause to be able to get behind and try and raise awareness and help out where we can.
Yeah, there was quite a few questions on South Africa for you too, and you train quite a bit in South Africa, don't you?
I do. I get out to Mpumalanga every year. Spend the best part of a month out there every year, just getting the big hours in, especially when over in Europe in early parts of the year it's still pretty icy and cold, and I hate the cold. I'm terrible in the cold, so. It's great for me to get out to Africa and almost just get back to my roots a little bit in a way, and just put the big hours in, and it's fantastic being out there. I mean, you know Mpumalanga well. You spent a fair bit of time out there as well. It's a beautiful part of the world. It's an absolutely gorgeous part of the world. Right on the doorstep of the Kruger as well. I mean, it's. I've occasionally run into sort of animals. I mean, elephant crossing the road, big main road, and it's just elephants strolling around. It's really, it's mental. Yeah, it's really good.
Brilliant. And does the whole team go out, or can you go out by yourself and take your backup crew with you?
So we normally try and keep it a small group. I mean, we'll go out probably 5 or 6 from the team in total, including staff, and just go out a couple riders maybe, and. So we just keep it small and manageable, and easy to look after a group like that.
Yeah, especially in Africa on those roads. Just as you've not chosen the easiest roads to ride on, have you?
No. I mean, you know what it's like. It's a little bit like running the gauntlet sometimes out there. Your bike can get swallowed up by some of the potholes in those roads.
100%. Crikey. Okay, buddy, so I've got some questions here. Who is your toughest competitor? These are just a couple of questions from some people, and then you can go back and get back on your bike. Toughest competitor?
I'd have to say it's at the moment it's probably a Slovenian rider who's won the last Grand Tour, which was the Volta a España. I would say Roglic is his name. A guy who's come from a ski jumping background, turned cyclist just a few years ago, and he's just come out and won basically one of the biggest races on the calendar last year. So he's extremely strong.
Wow, Jesus. Okay.
But obviously over the years, my biggest rival, who's now retired, he's a Spanish rider by the name of Contador. He was probably my toughest competition over the last previous years.
Can Ineos win the next Tour de France? Can somebody from Ineos definitely win the next Tour de France?
So we have won, what is it now? Last 6 out of 7 Tour de France's. And the one we didn't win, I basically crashed out with a broken wrist and a broken hand. So I'd say the odds are in our favor. We've got 3 good leaders, but having said that, it's nothing's a given in sport, and we've obviously got to fight extremely hard to try and get that win.
You're searching for number 5. You're 34 years of age.
Yep.
Realistically, what are your chances of getting number 5?
100%.
There's your positivity. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I'm obviously going to give it everything I've got. I came into the sport pretty late, as we were saying earlier. So I think in cycling terms, I still feel pretty young, even though I'm 34 at the moment. I'd like to keep going until as close to 40 as possible. So hopefully I've still got a few good years left in me.
Well, so you're going to cycle. So you probably sign a new contract and carry on for a few more years?
That's the plan, yeah. That's the plan.
Amazing. Your favorite Pinarello bike?
Favorite Pinarello? I mean, I've got to say the Pinarello we're on at the moment is incredible. It's called the F12. It's the latest bike. I mean, just super rigid, stiff bike, aero. Not much more you could really ask for.
The F12.
That's it.
Beautiful. Is cycling promoted in Kenya?
It's not a mainstream sport for sure, and it's struggling as a sport. I mean, I think all sports over in Kenya, it's very political as well. But there are some great people over there getting youngsters into sport. Actually, the guy who took me under his wing as well, David Kinja. He's doing a great job over there at keeping the flag flying and getting youngsters into it.
What's the toughest leg of the Tour de France?
I'd say it's normally stage 20 in general, just because you've done practically 3 weeks of racing, and it's the stage 21 is always a procession into Paris and a bit of a celebration. But the organisers will normally put a massive test on stage 20. And this year we were meant to do, I think it was close on a 40-kilometre time trial that finished up a wall of a climb at the end. So that was going to be the big test for stage 20 this year.
Cracky. Your max power output on Zwift?
Max power output on Zwift? I was having a bit of a sprint yesterday on the turbo trainer and got just over 1,000 watts.
What?
But it's definitely harder on the turbo trainer because you can't really swing the bike or anything like that. So it's over
1,000 watts.
Just for a few seconds, though, Kevin. Not holding that for any duration. But,
my goodness!
Come on, dude. You've got to give it a try next time you get on. Just
I will
sprint as hard as you can and see what you can get up to.
So I've got the Watt Bike Atom. What gear should I go to and then just belt it? What gear? I think there's 22 gears on it. I think
22 gears. Okay, you want to have something that gives you a fair bit of resistance. So when you start spinning, it actually pushes back on you a little bit. So otherwise you'll just spin out completely. So you probably want to be on a difficulty of sort of 7 out of 10, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right. I'll have a look at it. What else is there? Max power output. We've done Rugby World Cup. Your toughest competitor. Your partnerships and teams, mate. I actually think we're done. I think that was absolutely brilliant.
Kevin, I don't know what this one's all about here, but I've got a question from Esme Hill on Twitter saying, why did he have the badger haircut? I didn't see this badger haircut, but it sounds interesting.
Why don't we just say, if you didn't see it and you don't know anything about it, we should maybe just leave it at that and we don't have to worry about it.
Right, I'm going to get off Google.
I played the best and the most competitive test series that's ever been played, the 2005 Ashes, with the most ridiculous hairstyle, and I think that's what they're referring to at the moment.
Okay.
Crazy. The last thing, actually, diet. What's the story? Diet. How many calories do you have a day? Do you drink alcohol? You saw me drinking on my ride last Sunday, actually, through the 50-kilometer mark. I necked a beer. Yes, please. Any alcohol or nothing?
So the only time I'll drink alcohol is on the bike, is on stage 21 on the way into Paris.
Okay.
We'll have a glass of champagne or a beer with my teammates or something like that. But no, I mean, nothing's banned in terms of alcohol for us. I mean, we can have a glass of wine with dinner, but I mean, you do feel it the next day. You do feel it slows down recovery. So I mean, 9 times out of 10, I'll avoid it during the season and then let loose in November when we've got a bit of time off.
And the season is how long?
Season generally runs from January to October for us. But diet-wise, I mean, sometimes we are burning up to 5,500 calories, kilojoules on the bike. So I mean, we're talking big quantities of food, and that's why before racing we'll have these massive plates of rice and what have you to get the carbs in, basically for those big rides. But I'd say the biggest thing is to really just try and keep it healthy. I mean, stay away from saturated fats and foods that are going to block you up. I mean, try and keep it natural, try and keep it unprocessed. And
meat.
Yeah.
You're a South African, buddy.
Oh, I'm never going to live that one down, you saying that to me. But yeah, I mean, you need your protein, that's for sure. My advice would be just keep it healthy, and if you want to go up hills faster, you do have to shed the weight and try and keep the kilos down. So no easy way of doing that.
And I suppose you're in peak condition training to win your the next Tour de France. What would you say to people at the moment who are struggling with lockdown and struggling with where they are? And I mean, I think two overriding things that we've discussed is obviously the doping, but your positivity. What would you, in terms of being positive in your outlook on life, how can you help, I suppose, people watching this who aren't probably as positive as you?
One thing I found that when I broke my leg last year, the biggest thing that was sort of it changed my mind and everything was not being able to do any physical exercise. I was literally, I could feel I wasn't, that positivity wasn't necessarily there all the time when I wasn't able to exercise. And I found even doing something simple, like as soon as I got to the point where I could even do sit-ups or any form of exercise, it allowed me to sort of just completely change my mentality. So I'd say even if you're stuck on lockdown, you're stuck indoors, try and set aside half an hour where you can just do whatever it is, whatever you can do. If it's 50 push-ups, sit-ups, if it's jogging on the spot, if it's doing something, but set yourself just a half an hour a day. Make sure you can clear the mind and get some endorphins going, because it makes a huge difference.
I reckon we're done, buddy. Outstanding.
Thank you, Kevin.
Amazing.
Great chatting to you, dude. Thanks so much for the call.
No worries. Amazing. I think everybody wishes you the best over the next couple of weeks in your preparation. I hope the tour happens. And number 5's yours, brother. And if we find out that anyone in management has told you that you're not going to be number 1, we're coming for him. We're all over them. I don't know who your manager is. I don't know who your boss is. But if you're watching, Froome's 1. End of.
Cheers, Kevin. Thanks a lot, buddy.
Thanks, buddy. Bye,
Appreciate
mate.
it. Thanks,
Ciao.
guys.